On January 3rd, 2022, police entered the home of Sheila and Clay Fletcher after an alarming 911 call that their 36-year-old severely autistic daughter had stopped breathing. As police walked through the front door, they were immediately hit with the overpowering stench of feces, urine, and death. As they entered the living room, their eyes would be drawn to the couch, which displayed the emaciated Lacey Fletcher. Her body was sunken into a crater in the couch, covered in maggots and insects, as well as her own feces and urine. Her parents had apparently been gone for the weekend, leaving their immobile daughter to rot in her own flesh. Her skin had fused with the leather couch from the feces and rotting flesh congealing together. But that's just scratching the surface. The neglectful behavior of the parents goes back decades, with evidence showing that Lacey had been confined to the couch for at least 12 years. Before the neglect, 10-year-old Lacey and her parents Sheila and Clay moved to Slaughter, Louisiana in 1995. Lacey had been diagnosed with autism, but was still able to get by in school, and even joined the Brownsville Baptist Academy volleyball team in 9th grade. One of her friends at the time described her as one of the sweetest people you could ever meet, so very kind. But after 9th grade is when everything went downhill. She was taken out of school by her parents as a result of her autism worsening and the development of severe anxiety. They began homeschooling her, and rather than take her to a doctor to help her deal with her conditions, they simply ignored it. Her health would decline, and conditions worsened as time went on, with her reportedly becoming nonverbal. One neighbor recalled that he hardly ever saw her after 9th grade, but she had invited him and others over to watch Disney movies when they were 17 or 18. He recalled that Lacey was very smart, but not as mature as other kids her age. She would hardly ever be seen after this. The last sighting of her was from 2007, when Lacey was 21 years old. A neighbor saw her out in the street exercising with small weights, seemingly in decent health. However, in 2010, the parents visited the doctor's office without Lacey. They reported that her reclusive behavior was worsening, and she refused to leave the house, hardly even moving from the couch. Doctors insisted that she be brought in, so that they could provide a thorough exam of her, but instead, the parents once again ignored it. The last time Lacey would ever see a doctor in her lifetime was when she was 16, 20 years before her eventual death. Despite what was going on behind closed doors, Sheila and Clay were seen as pillars of the community, highly respected and involved in church. When neighbors asked about her well-being, the parents would say she's fine and change topics as fast as possible. From 2010 to 2022, Lacey had been confined to the couch, only leaving for brief periods of time, and never outside of the living room. Her parents refused to get her proper help, and as time went on, Lacey became more and more of a burden to them. The cause of her inability to move is speculative, but Lacey was either so horribly malnourished that she was too weak to move, or she had suffered from locked-in syndrome. In the case of the latter, she would have been awake, alert, and aware, but unable to move anything except for her eyes. However, this diagnosis has been disputed by certain sources. With Lacey unable to care for herself, her parents would leave her alone for the weekend. Upon their return, they would of course find Lacey dead, and dialed 911 at 2 a.m. on January 3rd, 2022. A sheriff's deputy arrived at the scene and found Lacey's body. Shocked by what he'd seen, he called for more units, and for the coroner. The experienced coroner, Dr. Bickham, would go on to play a pivotal role in this case, helping police determine exactly what had happened and pushing for harsh punishment. As Bickham entered the home, he was hit with a stench he had never smelled before in his entire career. To his right were the parents of Lacey. Clay appeared emotionless, with no expression on his face. Sheila had her head between her knees, seemingly shedding a tear or two. To his left was the living room containing Lacey's body. She was sunk deep into the couch, nearly up to her shoulders. Over the 12 or more years she had been there, her body weight had created a crater in the couch, acting as a prison she was unable to climb out of due to her weakened state. She was slumped over on her left side, wearing nothing but a small blue t-shirt, not even covering her breasts. Her legs were contracted underneath her, stiff and atrophied from malnourishment and little use. Her face displayed a disturbing expression, with her mouth agape and eyes wide open. She was covered from head to toe in her own feces, even in her ears and matted into her hair. She was also covered in sores and abscesses, and had maggots feasting on her while she was still alive. The flesh, which had been in contact with the couch for over a decade, had been eroded, with parts of her back and butt rotted down to the bone. She had yellow and black patches of rotting flesh all over her body. Perhaps the worst of all, the couch acted as a prison, and her flesh had practically melted into it, fusing her to the leather. There was no food in reach of the couch, except for a bag of hard candies. In an attempt to survive, Lacey had eaten her own feces as well as yellow foam from the couch, which was later found in her stomach. On the cluttered table in front of the couch was lotion bottles, talcum powder, wipes, nasal spray, and more. The parents obviously had the ability and supplies to take care of Lacey, which makes the fact that they had let their daughter's condition reach anywhere near this point even more sickening. Lacey's body was taken to the coroner's office, where Dr. Bickham performed an autopsy. She weighed just 96 pounds at the time of her death. Her cause of death was stated as severe medical neglect, which led to chronic malnutrition, acute starvation, immobility, acute ulcer formation, osteomyelitis, aka bone infection, which finally led to sepsis. It was also found that she had COVID at the time of her death. The neglect that had taken place was determined not possible to have been over just one weekend while the parents were away, but rather more than 12 years of agony. When the parents were questioned by police, their explanation was bafflingly unbelievable. They would say that Lacey's anxiety was so bad that she refused to leave the living room, only leaving the couch for short periods of time. They also said that rather than go to the bathroom, she would relieve herself on towels near the couch. While that may be true, they claimed that their nonverbal, autistic child had never complained to them about the rotting flesh and sores all over her body, and that she was allowed to move freely as she pleased. The coroner stated that it was impossible for her to not have been in excruciating pain, and the parents' implication that the suffering was self-inflicted is truly disgusting. Dr. Bickham described Lacey's death as the most disturbing crime he had ever witnessed in his long career. He claimed he cried and was unable to eat for a week after the autopsy. The parents were charged with second-degree murder, but the charges were later changed to manslaughter. The images shown to the jury were so disturbing that medics were on constant standby for each of the 12 jurors. On March 20th, 2024, they were sentenced to 20 years in prison with 5 years of probation. They expressed remorse during the trial, stating that they would do anything to go back and change what happened. Sheila and Clay Fletcher carried out perhaps the most disturbing and disgusting case of neglect in history, allowing their daughter to die in the most gruesome way imaginable, rather than even attempting to get her help.